The first scream did not sound human. It cut through the concrete halls of Iron Gate like a knife, bouncing off steel doors and metal bars. The emergency lights had just gone out. The whole prison was dark, except for the faint red glow of backup power and the thin beams of flashlights shaking in scared hands. Somebody was pounding on glass, over and over, like they were trying to break out of the world itself. Daniel Hayes stood in the control room with sweat running down his back. He was only 25, and this was his third month working inside Iron Gate, the prison people on TV called the world's most dangerous. But tonight, it felt worse than that. It felt like the world's angriest prison. On the big screens in front of him, he could see parts of the prison in broken flashes. One camera flickered on, then off again. Another showed a hallway full of smoke. Another showed two prisoners fighting, their faces twisted with rage, while other men stood around them, cheering like it was a show. "Systems are dead," Officer Ruiz shouted behind him, slamming his hand on the control panel. "Doors aren't reading. Cameras are going in and out. This is bad, kid. This is real bad." Daniel's fingers flew over the keyboard, but nothing answered. The buttons that usually open and close gates were dead gray. The screen showed one word over and over: error. Somewhere below them, metal clanged. A siren started, then choked and stopped. In the distance, Daniel heard something he had never heard in the prison before. Cheering. Loud, wild cheering. The sound of hundreds of men who suddenly felt free. That sound alone made his stomach twist. Prisoners were never supposed to feel free in Iron Gate. If they did, it meant something had gone very, very wrong. He looked up at screen 4, D Block. It was known as the cage inside the cage. These were the men other prisoners feared. Gang leaders, contract killers, men who had tried to escape more than once. Their cells were lined with extra steel. Their doors were never opened without 5 officers in body armor and a captain giving the order. Now, on the flickering screen, Daniel saw something that made his blood run cold. The door to cell D-19 stood wide open, and the man walking out of that cell, slow and calm, was Lester Cole. Most people in the country knew him by another name, the Judge. He was a former gang leader who had ordered attacks on people from inside prison walls. Rumors said he had more power behind bars than many people did outside. He had a long scar down one side of his face and eyes that never seemed to blink. How is his door open? Daniel whispered. Ruiz went pale. That's impossible. Somebody opened that. On the screen, Lester looked up at the camera. For a second, it felt like he was staring straight into the control room. He smiled just a little, like he knew something Daniel didn't. Then the camera went black. The pounding on the glass got louder. Daniel spun around. The control room had a small window that looked out over the main yard. Normally it showed men walking in circles or playing basketball under watch. Now the yard was chaos. In the red emergency light, he could make out shapes running, pushing, climbing. Some men were trying to get to the fences. Others were just trying not to get crushed. "Hayes! Over here!" Ruiz shouted. "We have to call outside help. State police, National Guard, everybody." He pointed at the only thing still working, an old landline phone bolted to the wall, kept there just in case. It had its own power, its own line. It did not rely on the prison system. Daniel grabbed it with shaking hands and started to dial. That's when he heard the soft click behind him, the sound of the control room door unlocking. He turned slowly. The door was heavy steel, meant to only open from the inside. But now the red lock light had turned green. The handle began to move. Ruiz pulled his baton. "Back up, kid," he whispered. "Back up now." The door swung open. A tall figure stood in the doorway, half in shadow, half in red light. It was not a guard. It was Lester Cole. He had blood on his knuckles, calm eyes, and a small smile. Behind Lester, down the hall, Daniel could see 3 more men, all from D Block, all dangerous, all loose. Lester stepped inside, looked at the dead screens, then at the landline phone in Daniel's hand. "Now, gentlemen," he said in a smooth, low voice, "we're going to have a very important talk about who really runs Iron Gate." He took one slow step forward. Daniel's mind raced. Do I fight? Do I run? Do I call for help? Before he could decide, Lester lifted his hand. In it, pointed straight at Daniel's chest, was a gun. A gun that should never have been inside a maximum security control room. How did a prisoner get a gun inside the world's most dangerous prison? And what secret was powerful enough to shut the whole place down? Everything Daniel thought he knew about Iron Gate was about to change. Hours earlier, before the blackout, before the gun, before the screams and the chaos, he had thought this was just another hard job on another long day. He had no idea that tonight, Iron Gate would show him its darkest side. The morning had started with clear blue sky and the sound of steel gates opening for the day shift. Daniel stood just outside the main entrance, looking up at the gray walls of Iron Gate State Penitentiary. The walls were so high, they seemed to cut the sky in half. Rolls of razor, wire glittered at the top like sharp silver crowns. He took a slow breath, trying to calm the nervous feeling in his stomach. You look like you're about to throw up, rookie. Daniel turned to see Officer Mason walking toward him, coffee in hand. Mason was in his 40s, with tired eyes that had seen too many things. He had been working at Iron Gate since before Daniel was in middle school. I'm fine, Daniel said, straightening his uniform. Just thinking. Thinking is dangerous in there, Mason said with a crooked smile. You'll learn to switch your brain off after a while. They went through metal detectors and security checks. Heavy doors opened and closed behind them with deep booming sounds, like the prison was swallowing them whole. Inside, the air smelled like bleach, sweat, and something else. Old fear, maybe. Men in orange jumpsuits walked in lines, watched by officers on raised walkways. Voices echoed off the walls. Iron Gate had a reputation. The news called it the world's most dangerous prison. Some said once you went in, you never truly left. Even if you were an officer, the place stayed in your head. At roll call, the staff gathered in a plain room with peeling paint and buzzing lights. Warden Clark stood at the front, tall, with a firm mouth and sharp eyes. He looked like a man who had seen too much and trusted very little. Listen up, he said, voice cutting to the chatter. We've got new procedures going into effect this week. We had some strange activity in the system last month. Cameras flickering, doors locking on their own. The techs say it's just old wiring, but we don't take chances here. Strange activity, someone muttered behind Daniel. Clark didn't look amused. If you see something off, anything that doesn't fit, you report it. Right away. I don't care if it's a buzzing light or a door that feels slow. Understood. Yes, sir. The officers answered in one tired voice. Later, in the break room, Mason leaned in close to Daniel. You know why the cameras flicker? He asked. Why? Daniel said. Because this place was built on top of an older prison, Mason replied. Some say there's a whole level under us that got shut down years ago. E-block. No windows, no yard, no nothing. They say the worst of the worst were down there. Daniel frowned. Is that true? Mason shrugged. I've only seen it once, and I don't like talking about it. Before Daniel could ask more, the radio crackled to life, calling them the C-block. C-block's yard looked calm from a distance. Men sat at metal tables, some playing cards, some just staring at the sky like they wished they could reach it. But as Daniel and Mason came closer, he felt the tension in the air like a rubber band pulled too tight. Two prisoners stood nose to nose near the fence. One was tall and thin with tattoos creeping up his neck. The other was shorter, muscled like a boxer. Back up, both of you, Mason said, stepping between them. You know the rules. They keep shorting us on food, the tall one said. Trays lighter every week. Yeah, the shorter one snapped. Maybe that's because you keep stealing from everyone else, Gabe. Daniel watched their hands, just like he'd been trained. Not their faces. Hands gave away danger faster. Gabe's fists were clenched. The boxer's fingers flexed like he was ready to swing. Daniel stepped up beside Mason. Hey, he said, trying to sound calm. You want to spend a week in the hole over a mashed potato fight? Sit down. Some of the other prisoners laughed. The tension broke like thin glass. The two men backed away, still glaring, But they sat down. Mason gave Daniel a look. "Not bad, rookie," he murmured. Sometimes words work better than batons. For a little while, the day moved on with nothing major happening. Daniel walked to tiers, checked locks, and watched how prisoners moved. The loud ones trying to look tough, and the quiet ones always watching. In the afternoon, Daniel was sent to D Block for the first time. Just hearing the name made his skin prickle. "You sure about this?" he asked Mason as they walked. "You want to work here, you have to know D Block," Mason said. "But keep your mouth shut and your eyes open. These are not the loud ones. These are the ones who think." Entering D Block felt like walking into a freezer. The air was colder and the silence was heavier. Each cell door was solid steel, with only a small window. Names and numbers were printed on the outside. As they passed cell D19, Daniel felt a chill run down his spine. "Who's in there?" he asked. "Lester Cole," Mason said quietly. "They call him the judge. Careful you don't look too long. He doesn't like people staring." But Daniel had already looked. Through the small window, he could see a man sitting on the edge of his bunk, reading a book. He looked up as if he knew they were there. His eyes met Daniel's. For a second, Daniel could not move. There was something empty and deep in those eyes, like a dark well. Then Lester smiled, slow and easy, and raised a book like he was making a toast. "Keep walking," Mason muttered. That night, as Daniel was finishing his paperwork, Mason dropped a folder on his desk. Background reading on the key players in Iron Gate. One page was marked with a red corner, Lester Cole. Inside the file, Daniel read, "Cole, Lester J., leader of Judge's Circle Gang. Linked to multiple attacks ordered from inside prison. Suspected of controlling contraband flow. Rumored to have contacts among some staff." Daniel tapped that last line. "Is that true?" he asked. "Some staff." Mason looked around to make sure they were alone. "This place runs on rules," he said quietly. "But it also runs on deals. Some officers make bad choices. They think a little extra cash won't hurt. They think they can control it." "And can they?" Daniel asked. Mason shook his head. "In the world's most dangerous prison, the one thing you can't afford to sell is control. Once you give a piece of it away, you never get it back." Later, Daniel went to sleep in the small staff housing just outside the walls, his head full of cold eyes and red-marked files. He dreamed of doors opening by themselves. He woke up to the sound of thunder. Only it wasn't thunder. It was something else. The next day started with a storm. Dark clouds rolled over the prison, and rain slashed against the windows. Lightning flashed, making the razor wire gleam white for a second and then vanish back into gray. "You feel that?" Ruiz asked as they walked into the control room. "Feel what?" Daniel said. "The hum," Ruiz replied, tapping the wall. "Power's acting funny. We get storms like this. It messes with the system. Last time, some of the cameras flickered." Daniel tried to laugh it off, but a small, worried part of him remembered the warden's warning. Daniel settled into the control room seat. From here, he could see almost every part of Iron Gate on the screens. Yards, hallways, the canteen, D Block. It was like watching a very slow, very dangerous movie. For a while, everything looked normal. Then one of the D Block cameras flickered. Just once. On. Off. On. Daniel frowned and wrote it down like he had been told. Camera 4 flicker. 10:13 a.m. The lights hummed but stayed on. Lunch passed. Afternoon count passed. At 6:02 p.m., as the storm outside reached its loudest, it happened. Every light in the prison blinked off. For 1 second, there was total darkness. Then the red emergency lights came on. Alarms began to chirp in confused little half-beeps. "What just happened?" Daniel asked. Ruiz cursed. "Main power's gone. Backup is on, but it's weak. We need to restart the system." On the screens, some images came back. Others stayed black. Then Daniel saw it. On camera 4, D-block hallway, a door light turned from red to green. Cell D19. Lester Cole's cell. "Ruiz," Daniel said slowly. "Look." Ruiz turned. His face went as white as the lightning outside. "That's not supposed to happen," he said. "His door's on a separate lock. Backup only. It doesn't just open." But it had. They watched, frozen, as the heavy steel door slid open with a slow, grinding motion. Lester stepped out. He looked straight up at the camera and smiled. Then the camera went dead. Sirens started for real this time. Loud, angry sirens that shook the walls. "Lockdown," someone yelled over the radio. "Full lockdown. All units to..." The radio cut out mid-sentence. The prison shook as men shouted, pounded on doors, and began to move in ways they were never meant to move. Everything after that happened fast. Ruiz tried to reboot the system. Daniel tried the intercom. No response. On another screen, he saw prisoners forcing open a door that should have been solid. On another, he saw smoke pouring from the kitchen. Then came the pounding on the control room glass. Men were in the yard, running wild in the red light. Ruiz grabbed the landline phone. "I'm calling outside," he shouted. "Give me the state police." The guard. "Anyone?" "Try," Daniel said, backing away from the window. He could feel his heart slamming in his chest. The prison, the world's most dangerous, was slipping out of control. And somewhere inside it, a man who used to control crimes from behind bars was now free in the halls. Lester Cole, the judge, a man rumored to have friends on both sides of the bars. Daniel turned toward the door. He saw the lock light change color. Green. The handle began to move. The door opened. Lester stepped in, a calm shadow with sharp eyes and blood on his hands. And in that instant, as the gun came up and pointed at Daniel's chest, the rookie officer realized something terrible. This might not be a simple power failure. This might be a plan. Daniel's mouth went dry. A second set of footsteps came from behind Lester. Another figure stepped into the red light of the control room. Officer Mason. His uniform was neat. His hair was combed back like always, but his eyes were calm. Too calm for what was happening. "Mason," Daniel breathed. "What are you doing here?" Mason closed the door behind him with a soft click. He didn't answer right away. He just walked to Lester's side like they had done this 100 times before. Ruiz swallowed hard. "You've got to be kidding me." Lester's gun never moved from Daniel's chest. "Relax, Officer Hayes," he said. "Nobody wants us getting messy. Not yet." Mason looked at Daniel like a teacher looking at a student who failed a test. "I told you," Mason said quietly. "In here, control is the only thing that matters." "You're working with him?" Daniel asked. Mason sighed. "You think a place like Iron Gate runs on clean paychecks and good intentions? This prison eats people, kid. It eats officers too. You either learn how the real system works, or you get chewed up." Ruiz stepped forward, anger shaking his voice. "You sold out your badge for what?" "For him." Lester chuckled. "Not for me. For survival." Then he nodded at the dead screens. "We're going to fix your little power problem. There's another system under this one. A backup of the backup." Mason slid open a hidden metal plate, revealing an old black screen and extra keys. The old hardware. The first bones of Iron Gate. Mason typed a long code into black screen. Green letters flashed. Override accepted. Some of the big screens in front of them flickered back to life. Not all of them, just a few. Daniel saw a hallway he didn't recognize. The walls were rough concrete. The lights were dim and yellow. The cells had thick doors with round windows. "What block is that?" Daniel asked. Ruiz leaned closer. "That's not any block I know." Lester's smile widened. "E-block," he said simply. "The basement. The place you were told was closed years ago. The place they say no one uses." Mason kept typing. "They moved some people down there after the last riot. People they wanted off the books. People who know too much." Daniel stared at the screen. He could see shadows moving behind some of the windows. "There's still prisoners down there?" "Not for long," Lester replied. On another monitor, a heavy door in E-block slid open. Men in old-looking uniforms stepped out. Their faces were hard. Some had gray hair. Some had scars. They didn't look like normal inmates. They moved with strange discipline. "Who are they?" Ruiz asked. Let's just say they're specialists, Lester replied. Men who know their job. Tonight their job is to make sure nobody stops us. One of the men on the screen looked straight into the camera and gave a short nod. The feed cut out. Somewhere else in the prison, officers were still fighting fires and holding gates, but in this room, a much deeper game had begun. Chaos roared in the rest of the prison. Backup alarms wailed. On another monitor, Daniel saw officers fighting to hold a gate against a wave of prisoners trying to break through. In another, smoke billowed from the kitchen doors. Somewhere out there, people were getting hurt. Maybe worse. Daniel's stomach twisted. This isn't just a riot, he thought. This is a takeover. Lester watched his face. You're thinking about all the people out there, he said quietly. The officers, the inmates who just want to keep their heads down. You think I don't care about them? You don't, Daniel said. If you did, you wouldn't be doing this. Lester's jaw tightened. For the first time, Daniel saw anger that wasn't cold. I care about the truth, Lester said. Iron Gate is not what they told you. I used to believe the story, too. Most dangerous prison in the world. That's what the news calls it, right? They never asked what made it that way. Who made it that way? He pointed at the E-block screen. This place was built to break people. But someone decided that wasn't enough. They started using E-block to test how far men could be pushed, how long they could live with no sun, how they'd react when food was cut, then returned, when sleep was taken. They wanted to know what would happen to the mind, to the soul. That's not true, Daniel whispered. Mason didn't speak. His silence said more than words. Lester nodded toward him. Ask your friend. He's seen the files. He's been down there. He knows what they did. Daniel looked at Mason in shock. Is he telling the truth? Mason's eyes clouded. I didn't start it, he said quietly. It was before my time. But once you see something like that, you realize the world outside doesn't want to know. They just want the bad men locked away and forgotten. Someone had to keep order. Someone had to make sure the worst stayed in one place. He looked at Lester, but then he came along with his own ideas. Lester smiled slightly. My idea is simple, he said. If the world wants to lock away its sins, it should at least admit they exist. Tonight, we open the door. We show them E-block still breathes. We show them Iron Gate is not just a cage. It's a secret. Daniel's hands trembled against the zip tie on his wrists. You're going to kill people, he said. No one will listen to your story. They'll just see blood. That depends on who lives to tell it, Lester replied. He nodded at Mason. Next phase. More commands. A screen showing the main front gate appeared. We go to the warden's wing, Lester said. We get a file called E-block Special Program. The one your warden prays never sees a courtroom. Daniel's heart dropped. So that's what this is about. I want the truth, Lester said softly. Then he swung the gun fully toward Ruiz, which is why we're taking a guide. Ruiz froze. Kid, don't. Daniel's mind raced. There had to be something he could do. Fine, he said at last. I'll help, but you need me with free hands. I can't guide you like this. Mason hesitated, then cut Daniel's ties. As Daniel turned to lead them out, his fingers brushed the old keypad for the hidden system. He quickly typed 4 numbers, 9-1-1-0. A tiny red light began to blink in the corner of a map. Maybe, just maybe, someone outside would see.